Last Thursday, we completed the first month of our winter retreat, and I thought to share a few reflections from that time. First of all, I have to say that when I lived at Chenrezig Institute in Australia, our morning daily practice was Lama Chupa, or the Guru Puja. The first few years I lived there, all the nuns got together in the morning and did this practice together, and it was a very lovely practice to share, as well as the 35 Buddha practice. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche emphasized this as a daily practice for the nuns, or the monks too, I guess, throughout, for the students of FPMT, and has given extensive teachings on it. So it's a practice that's very dear and near to my heart. And although I taught the Shakyamuni Buddhi practice as part of the Discovering Buddhism program, I never took it on as a personal daily practice. To be completely transparent with you, during this retreat, I noticed some thoughts of arrogance arising in my mind, like, well, this is a elementary practice, isn't it? This is a beginner practice. It's a very simple practice. Why are we doing this for 3 months? But I'm happy to say that I was proved wrong. Although many of the elements are similar within the two practices, the Shakyamuni Buddha practice and the Lama Chupa, there's going for refuge, generating bodhicitta, the four immeasurables, the seven-limb prayer, making requests. But I found that there was something very fundamental, something very grounding, very moving to spend a month meditating on Shakyamuni Buddha and developing my relationship with him. Venerable Chodron posed a very evocative question one night during the teaching. She said, after all, isn't that what relationships are? You think about the good qualities of a person you're relating to, and you think about the positive experiences that you had with that person. That's really what relationships are built on, isn't it? There's no inherent relationship outside of our thoughts. Our relationships are conceptual. I thought it was a very interesting thing. I'd never thought about it quite that way. And the same is true with our relationships with Shakyamuni Buddha or any Buddhist deity, as well as our spiritual mentors, right? So we may have never thought about doing a longer retreat on Shakyamuni Buddha because, after all, he's not a tantric deity. Why would you do a month or 3 months of retreat on Shakyamuni Buddha? But he is our fundamental teacher. And if we familiarize ourselves with all the elements found in this practice of the Shakyamuni Buddha, I would venture to say that it grounds and stabilizes every other practice that we do. Why? Because all of our Buddhist practices originate with our fundamental teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. I don't know about you, but I have quite a few commitments to do each day. I've collected over the years. And I also have meditations that I try to do every day. And so very often I feel pushed for time. You have that experience? In our normal daily life, I feel pushed for time. There's always more that I want to do. There's always more that I want to think about and familiarize with. Even with a couple hours in the morning and an hour and a half or 2 hours at night, there's still more that I want to do. And I feel rushed getting my commitments done and in the way that I want to do them. So for me, doing this retreat on Shakyamuni Buddha was a complete delight, a breath of fresh air, a deep rest in virtue. We had 5 sessions each day of an hour and 15 minutes to leisurely go through visualizing the Buddha and generating refuge, thinking about the causes for refuge, and there are many, and generating bodhicitta and thinking about the causes for generating bodhicitta, and again, there are many. Cultivating the 4 immeasurables, offering the 7 limbs and the mandala offering, making requests, and then reciting the Buddha's mantra. And again, I was surprised how joyful I felt during the first few weeks of the retreat. But of course, we keeping in our minds in virtue, we are bound to feel happy. Did you experience this too? So we have to be clear that feeling happy is not the main purpose of any Buddhist retreat, but it's a very welcome byproduct, I think. It's a direct experience, maybe direct evidence that the first general characteristic of karma, that karma is definite, is true, that happiness comes from virtuous karma. At least we can surmise that virtuous actions water the seeds of virtuous karmic seeds in our mind and give rise to experiences of happiness and ease, well-being, and peace. Of course, I still did my commitments and the usual Abbey chores during the breaks, as we all do on retreat. But the retreat sessions, for me, were very relaxed. I could focus on each part of the practice until I really felt that my mind or my heart were moved in that direction. So I have a good source for doing the practice in this way. In 2014, Kadrola did a 7-day teaching at CI on a practice called the inseparability of Avalokiteshvara and His Holiness the Dalai Lama. It's a beautiful practice, and again, it's not too complicated, but I remember her saying that sometimes it takes her all day just to do that practice. And it's not because she's a poor practitioner, that's for sure. And it's not because she gets distracted, but because she said there's just so much to meditate on each part of the practice. And certainly we took our time when we went through that practice, really spending time to cultivate the meditations. So since the winter retreat is 3 months long, I divided the Lam Rim into a month for each scope. So I spent a week on precious human rebirth. It's not actually part of the initial scope of the Lam Rim, but it's a preliminary. But thinking about the preciousness of this human rebirth also brings a lot of appreciation and a lot of joy, and helps us not to take our incredible conducive circumstances for granted. I spent a week on death and impermanence. It's a more sobering topic, but a necessary one, and one that can also energize our practice, because it's a good reality check to see how ready we are for our own eventual demise. I spent a week on refuge and a week on karma. And again, since one of the purposes of this winter retreat is to deepen our relationship with the Buddha, I found the week on refuge, meditating on the topic of refuge, very fruitful. It's good to remember that Shakyamuni Buddha didn't come into being independent of causes and conditions. His body was formed by a vast array of perfect virtues. And it can be so encouraging to remember that he was once like us, an ordinary being, and through diligently creating the various appropriate causes, and he attained full awakening. And so I once again went back to the 8 excellent qualities of the 3 jewels that are taught in Maitreya's Sublime Continuum. A very interesting way to talk about the Dharmakaya and the Rupakaya, or the truth body and the form body when we're looking at the Buddha jewel, and also the 8 qualities of the Dharma jewel and the Sangha jewel. And I spent a few days reading over and meditating on the 32 major signs of the Buddha and also their causes. And I just found this so inspiring from my mind. I've read these before, but again, I suppose supported by the virtue of the activity of retreat, then they impacted my heart in a new way. So the principal causes of these signs are the vast collections of merit and wisdom of the Buddha. But in addition, each of the 32 signs has its own specific cause, and these are causes that we can identify and practice now. For example, the soles of his feet and the palms of a Buddha's hands show impressions of a 1,000-spoked wheel, as distinct as if carved from ivory and seen even from a distance. Buddhas walk slightly above the surface of the earth, never harming or disturbing any creature beneath their feet, yet they leave these clear imprints of wheels behind. And the cause of such a remarkable attribute is having always greeted and escorted their spiritual mentor, and having had a selfless attitude of offering personal service to others. So this is something that we can practice when we have retreats here and we bring Venerable Chodron down from her cabin. We can think about, this is creating a cause. This can become a cause for my eventual awakening. The fingers and toes of a Buddha are connected with a web of light arising from having practiced the 4 ways of gathering disciples, which are being generous, speaking kindly, giving encouragement regarding the points of the Dharma, and setting oneself as an example by acting in accord with those points. The skin of the Buddha, no matter how old they may be, remains unwrinkled and as smooth as that of a nursing baby. This reflects always having been generous with nourishing food and drink. So no more griping about having to cook, okay? This is a cause for a very worthwhile effect. The body of a Buddha is very straight and tall. The cause of his extra height is from completely ridding himself of taking any creature's life. The Buddha has a white treasure-like curl of hair in his mid-brow that curls very tightly clockwise. This is one of the more difficult signs to achieve and is the result of having served all of his superiors with respect, his parents, his teachers, his elders, spiritual masters, abbots, and so forth, and having respected them as his crown jewel. It also comes from having helped others achieve higher states of rebirth. And the top of his crown has a protrusion, a nushnisha, a round, circular, clockwise protrusion appearing to be about 4 finger widths high. And this is the most difficult physical feature to achieve and is the result of having always visualized his spiritual mentor on the crown of his head, as well as his having visited temples and monasteries and engaged in spiritual practices there. So these are things that we're doing. The sutra revealing the inconceivable secret of the Tathagata speaks of 60 or more magnificent qualities of the Buddha's speech, through which they guide sentient beings to higher rebirths, liberation, and full awakening. So when a Buddha speaks, each person understands exactly what is most helpful for him or her to hear at that time. This is amazing, and we have direct experience of this going to teachings, those of you who've been to teachings with His Holiness. I always find it interesting to talk to people as they're coming out of the hall or the amphitheater, wherever it's held, and to ask them. And often people will say, I felt like he was talking directly to me. So he might utter one word. One person hears something about impermanence, another hears something about compassion, a third person hears something about emptiness. It's quite amazing. A Buddha's voice is melodious and brings harmony and peace to the minds of listeners. It's never harsh or cruel, and a Buddha's words are always inspiring. They reinforce and enhance our ability to integrate the Dharma and eliminate our doubts. It's like a lion's roar. A Buddha's speech conquers extremist views. It's like the bellow of an elephant. It makes the Dharma known without hesitation. Like Brahma's melodious voice, sentient beings can listen to it without becoming weary. And when someone's mind is ready, no matter where she or he is or what circumstances they find themselves in, a Buddha's speech will ripen her mind, his or her mind, stimulating in her to gain understanding and realizations. And then thinking about the Buddha's mind, it directly and simultaneously knows all existent phenomena, ultimate and conventional truths simultaneously, without any contradiction or conflict. I really like thinking about this quality, that the Buddha's mind pervades all of space. There's not ever a place where the Buddha's mind doesn't exist. And because the Buddha's mind and the subtle wind that it rides on are together, they're never separated, then the Buddha exists in every space. There's never a time that we're without the Buddha's friendship, actually, or his presence. So a lot of this is beautifully explained in Volume 4 of the Library of Wisdom and Compassion, following the Buddha's footsteps, which also speaks about the 4 fearless proclamations of the Buddha. Again, so inspiring to read about. The 10 inconceivable powers of a Buddha, like their ability to know all the causes that have led to certain experiences that are present now, and to know all the results of particular causes that are being created right now, and to know all the dispositions of sentient beings. That's going to be so helpful for us to know how to teach sentient beings, how to guide them along the path. And also there are the 18 unshared qualities of the Buddha. So again, just reading through them and thinking about, which ones of these am I creating? How am I spending my time throughout the day? It helps us to develop our confidence in the Buddha's capacity to be an inspiring field of merit for our mind. So I thought to share some of my experiences this morning to remind people who are interested in Buddhism that it's up to us to create our relationship with the Buddha. There's never a moment when we are not an object of the Buddha's omniscient mind and his great compassion and wisdom. However, we might want to ask ourselves, well, how often do I think of the Buddha throughout my daily life? How much am I spending time cultivating that relationship with the Buddha? How can I actually improve that relationship? Any amount of time we spend thinking about the Buddha's qualities and studying, contemplating, or meditating on his amazing teachings will contribute to a greater admiring and aspirational faith in the Buddha. And since faith is one of the virtuous mental factors, every moment we spend cultivating faith creates corresponding experiences of happiness and ease in this life and future lives. So I greatly appreciate that Venerable Children recommended us doing this winter retreat on Shakyamuni Buddha. And some of us are continuing with that practice. Some of us are doing particular deity practices. Some of us are engaging in a different kind of retreat, the Buddha Hall retreat, offering service, creating incredible service in that way. And so that's what we're up to right now in our retreat.